My daughter called me from a closet. Dad, Mom brought a man home. He's angry. I told her to stay quiet. Then I heard footsteps and a door slam. She whispered, he found me. The line went dead. I played it for my commander. He said, take your squad. Go now. We landed on my street before midnight. He was shaking when he saw me. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. Sergeant First Class Darius Hale had spent more than half his adult life on military bases, in foreign deserts, on transport planes that smelled like engine fuel and boot rubber. He had spent more nights in a bunk than in his own bed. More mornings watching the sun come up over training grounds than over the quiet neighborhood in Henderson, Nevada, where he had grown up. He had accepted all of it, not because the Army was everything he wanted, but because sacrifice, in his understanding of the world, was simply what a man did. His father, Raymond Hale, had taught him that without ever saying it directly. Raymond worked double shifts at a car parts warehouse for most of Darius's childhood. Up before sunrise, home after dark, boots left by the front door because he was too tired to carry them further. He never lectured his son about strength or duty or what it meant to provide for people who depended on you. He just showed him what all of those things looked like every single day without complaint and without asking to be acknowledged for any of it. There was one particular image Darius had carried with him for over 20 years. He had been about 10 years old, homesick from school on a Tuesday, lying on the couch with a fever and a blanket while his mother was at work. Raymond had already left for his first shift. Around noon, Darius opened his eyes, and there was his father standing in the kitchen doorway in his work clothes, holding a paper bag from the deli down the road, soup, crackers, a carton of orange juice. He had driven 20 minutes from the warehouse on his lunch break. He had not called ahead. He set the bag on the coffee table, checked Darius's forehead with the back of his hand, nodded once, and was back out the door in under 5 minutes. Clocked back in before 1 o'clock. Darius had never mentioned that afternoon to anyone, but he had carried it everywhere he went afterward. He carried all of that into the Army at 19, through 2 overseas tours, through promotions earned on honest merit and field exercises in heat and cold that reduced other men to frustration and bitterness, while Darius just kept moving. He was not superhuman. He was trained, and more than trained, he was shaped by a father who had never once let his family wonder whether he would show up. He and Lena had met when he was 24 and home on a short leave. She was sharp and funny, with a low, easy laugh and the habit of saying exactly what she thought before deciding whether it was appropriate. He loved that immediately. He loved her quickly and completely, the way soldiers tend to love, with urgency, because urgency is all they have when orders could come through at any moment and they have to go. They married within a year. Maya came 2 years after that, and for a stretch of time that Darius would always describe as the most real part of his adult life, the three of them had something that felt whole. When he came home from a deployment, Maya would hear the car in the driveway and be at the front door before he reached the porch, crashing in him at full speed, her arms going around his leg, laughing and talking at once about everything he had missed. Those first few minutes home were the reason he wore the uniform. They were the thing that made the cost feel worth paying. But distance does something to a marriage over time. It does not break it all at once. It wears it down the way wind wears down a hillside, slowly, in ways that are easy to miss until the day you look up and the shape is completely wrong. Darius had noticed the change in Lena the way you notice a slow leak in something important, not all at once, but through small accumulating signals you tell yourself mean nothing. Her replies had grown shorter. Not cold, not openly hostile, just compressed. Texts where there had been calls. Brief check-ins where there had been real conversations. She stopped asking about his work the way she once had, stopped tracking the small details of his day the way a person does when they are genuinely interested in your life. When he came home, the house felt right on the surface, clean, food in the kitchen, Maya's drawings on the refrigerator. But the warmth that should have been in the evenings, the easy closeness of two people genuinely glad to be in the same room, had drained away and been replaced by something that looked like ordinary married life, but felt like a performance of it. He remembered one particular homecoming about 2 years before everything fell apart. He had flown in on a Thursday and driven straight from the airport. Maya had run to him. Lena had hugged him briefly and then gone back to the kitchen to finish cleaning up, and later that night, when Maya was in bed and the house was quiet, Darius had sat on the back porch and noticed something that should have been louder than it was. He did not feel like he had come home. He felt like he was visiting somewhere familiar. He had not named that feeling then. He had gone inside and told himself it was jet lag. He noticed Lena taking phone calls in the bedroom with the door not fully closed, but not open either. Her voice low, the conversation pausing when he walked past. She said it was friends. He did not press her on it. He told himself he was being respectful of her privacy. Looking back, he understood he had been avoiding a truth he was not ready to face, because the alternative was pulling at a thread that might unravel everything he had spent years building. Because there was Maya. Every video call from overseas, Maya was there. She told him about school, showed him drawings taped to her wall, asked when he was coming home with the unfiltered directness of a child who had not yet learned that some questions are complicated. Every time she asked, something in Darius locked into place. He would come home. He would always come home. He just could not always stay. By the time Maya was 9, Darius had been stationed at Fort Irwin in California for nearly a year. Close enough to home to feel the distance as something specific and personal. Far enough that the drive was not something he could make every night. He called every single day. He told himself the silence between him and Lena was the ordinary rhythm of a long marriage stretched thin by separation. He had been wrong about that. He just did not know how wrong until the Thursday night in early October when his phone lit up with Maya's name. It was early evening at the base when the call came through. Darius was at the small desk in his room, boots still on, working through a duty report on his laptop. The overhead light threw a flat white glare across the desk. Outside, the base had settled into its nighttime quiet, the particular stillness of a large installation after hours, when the machinery of the day winds down and leaves nothing behind but cool air and the sound of your own thinking. He had almost finished the report. He had been thinking about calling Maya before she went to bed. He looked at the screen. Maya. He answered before the second ring. "Hey, Bug," he said, using the nickname she had carried since she was 3 years old, when she used to crawl under furniture and peek out at people with those enormous serious eyes. "You should be getting ready for bed." But the voice that came back through the phone was not the voice of a child calling to share a story about her day. Something in it made him close the laptop and stand without consciously deciding to do either. Dad, barely above a whisper, breathing too fast. He was already moving toward the door. "Maya, talk to me. What's happening?" Mom brought Man home. A pause that lasted half a second and felt much longer. "He's angry, Dad. He's yelling." Darius stepped out into the hallway and kept his voice level and calm, because level and calm was the most useful thing he could give her right now. "Where are you right this moment?" "In my room." I was just in my room, and I could hear the crash. It was unmistakable. Not something small falling off a shelf. Something large, thrown or knocked over with force. The sound rang through the phone sharp and clean, glass on hard floor, and Darius felt his whole body respond the way it responded to danger. Not with panic. With cold, complete focus. Everything unnecessary pushed to the edges, the single immediate problem brought into perfect clarity. "Maya, the hallway closet, the big one by the bathroom. Go there right now. Don't stop. Go." "Okay." He heard her moving. Small, careful footsteps. The creak of a door. The sound of the closet settling around her. "I'm in," she whispered. "Good. Pull it all the way closed. Don't move. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." He was walking fast down the hallway now. Phone pressed hard his ear, forcing his breathing to stay even, because she would hear it if he was running, and he needed her to hear calm. He needed to be the calm she was borrowing from him. Footsteps on her end of the call. Heavy ones. Not Maya's. They came from above where she was hiding, crossing a floor toward the hallway, moving slowly and deliberately. The footsteps of someone who was looking for something. Then a door opened. Not knocked, not called to. The handle turned and the hinges gave. A silence followed, total and stretched out, the kind of silence that fills with all the things you cannot hear. And then Maya's whisper came back to him, so quiet he almost could not separate it from his own heartbeat. "He found me." The line went dead. Darius stared at the phone for 2 seconds. Then he dialed her back. 5 rings. Voicemail. He called Lena immediately after. Same result. He opened his recording application and played back the last 3 minutes of the call. Maya's voice, the crash, his own voice telling her to hide, the footsteps, the silence, the 3 words at the end. He stopped the recording. He knocked on the commander's door. Commander Reed Calloway was 62 years old and had been in uniform since before Darius was born. He had the particular stillness of a man who had seen enough serious things that he no longer wasted energy on reactions that served no useful purpose. He was at his desk when Darius entered and read Darius's face the moment the door opened. "Sit down," he said. "Sir, I need to remain standing." Darius held up the phone. "I need you to hear this." He played the recording. Reed Calloway did not speak or move for the full duration. When it ended, he sat back and looked at the phone in Darius's hand for 3 more seconds. How old is she? 9, sir. You can't reach her. No, answer on both numbers. Reed stood and came around the desk with the purposefulness of a man who had already made his decision and was now in motion. This is not a domestic matter, he said. This is a threat to a child. He moved to the coat hook in the corner. Take Trevino and Morrow. They're available and they can handle themselves. Drive tonight. Don't wait on transport. He turned back and pointed once. Document everything from this point forward. Everything you do, everything you see. I want a complete record. Already started, sir. Reed held his gaze. He had known Darius Hale for 6 years. He had watched him operate under pressure that would have compromised most men, and he had never once seen him act recklessly. He did not question this. He picked up his phone before Darius was fully out of the office. Darius had his bag packed in 4 minutes. Trevino and Morrow responded to his texts in under 60 seconds. They were out of the base gate at 10:17, the desert highway long and dark and empty in front of them. Darius sat in the passenger seat with his hands on his knees and said almost nothing for the entire 3-hour drive. He thought about his daughter, not about the marriage, not about what came next, just the specific problem in front of him and the specific person he was moving toward. Because when a child whispers, "He found me," and the line goes dead, you do not wait for morning. You move. They reached the suburban street outside Las Vegas before midnight. The neighborhood was the way it always was late at night. Quiet blocks, porch lights on timers, a few windows lit from inside, the rest dark. A dog barking somewhere in the distance. Cars and driveways. Everything on the surface looked ordinary and fine. Darius had learned a long time ago not to trust surfaces. He had bought this house 4 years ago on a weekend leave, driving through the neighborhood with Maya in the back seat pointing at every house she liked. She had liked this one because of the big tree in the front yard and the bright yellow front door. Darius had liked that the lot was on a corner and the sight lines from the main rooms were clear. The particular detail a 15-year Army man notices without being asked. He had not been inside in 6 weeks. Trevino pulled to the curb and cut the engine. The house was still lit, living room light on through the gap in the curtains, porch light burning. Darius got out and tried the front door handle before knocking. It was unlocked. He pushed it open and stepped inside, Trevino 1 step behind, Morrow covering the exterior. The living room stopped him for half a second. A lamp lay on its side, shade dented, the bulb still giving off a faint glow across the floor. The coffee table was shoved sideways, one leg snapped clean off. A wine glass had shattered against the baseboard, stem broken, the bowl spread in sharp fragments across the tile, dark wine soaking into the grout. The couch cushions were pushed aside. The room smelled of wine and tension and something that had already happened and could not be undone. He took it all in within 4 seconds. Then Lena's voice reached him from the couch. She was wrapped in a blanket with both hands gripping the edges and her knees pulled up. She looked up when Darius walked in, and the words came before he finished crossing the threshold. I don't know who he was. He just came in. The door wasn't locked, and he walked in, and he was already angry. Darius, I didn't know him. I've never seen him before. He just came in and started yelling, and I couldn't. Darius stopped in the center of the room and let her talk. He stood with his arms at his sides and his expression flat, and he listened to every word without reacting. He was not angry. He was reading. He had spent 15 years reading situations, reading what was real and what was constructed, because in his experience the difference between those two things was often the difference between the right response and a dangerous one. The account was too complete, too smooth. A person who has genuinely just been through a terrifying encounter with a stranger does not immediately produce a full organized narrative. They ask for help first. They need to know the situation is under control before they can start making sense of it. They reach for comfort before they offer information. Lena had led with the information. He waited until she ran out of momentum. "Where's Maya?" he said. For words. Nothing more. Lena blinked. The crying adjusted, volume turning down. "She's in the basement." When it started, she got scared and ran down there. He looked at her face. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes red-edged. But the specific physical signature of genuine fear was absent. No pale ring around the lips. No fine involuntary trembling in the hands that a body produces after a real shock. Her breathing was elevated, but even not the broken kind that follows genuine panic. No marks on her arms. No bruising on her wrists. Her clothes were wrinkled, but not torn or pulled. She looked like a woman wearing fear as a costume in a room she knew well. Darius looked at her for one more beat. Then he turned and walked toward the hallway without another word. The basement door was at the end of the hallway, past Maya's bedroom. Darius moved to it with Trevino behind him, opened it, and went down without hesitating. A single bulb on a pull cord at the bottom. Pale yellow light over a concrete floor half covered by storage bins and stack boxes. The smell of dust and sealed air. At the bottom, he stopped. A man was standing against the far wall. Late 30s, stocky, dark shirt untucked, face flushed from alcohol or anger or both. His arms went straight up the moment he got a full look at Darius and Trevino on the stairs. "I didn't touch her," he said, voice thick. "I swear to you, man. I did not put a single hand on her." Darius barely looked at him. He was looking at the far corner of the room, at the space behind the large plastic storage bins, where his daughter was. Maya was sitting on the bare concrete floor with her knees pulled to her chest and her arms wrapped tight around her shins. Not moving, not making a sound, hair loose and tangled, still wearing her school sweatshirt, the faded yellow one with the cartoon dog stitched across the chest, the one she wore at least 3 days every week. Her face was wet. Her eyes found Darius the moment he reached the base of the stairs, and in them he saw the thing that would stay with him long after everything else from that night had faded. Relief, so complete it looked exactly like pain. He crossed the room in 4 steps and crouched in front of her. "I've got you," he said quietly. "You're safe. I'm right here." She pressed her face against his jacket and held on with both hands, gripping the fabric. He felt her shoulders shake once and then go still, the way a child tries to be brave when they are too tired for it. He put one hand on the back of her head and let her hold on for as long as she needed. He did not rush it. Behind him, Trevino had the man against the wall with a hand on his arm. After a minute, Darius stood and turned to face Travis Klein. "What is your name?" "Travis. Travis Klein. Why are you in this house, Travis?" Travis looked at the stairs, at Trevino, at Darius's face, completely still and completely attentive, the face of a man who had asked the same question however many times it needed to be asked. "She told me it was fine," Travis said. "She said the house was going to be empty tonight. She said her husband wasn't coming back anytime soon." Darius took out his phone, opened the recording application, and pressed record. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Travis Klein told him. By the time police arrived, Lena had shifted strategies. She had moved from fast, over-prepared denial to something slower and more vulnerable. Her voice lower, her answers vaguer, as if she was still processing. She said she did not know the man's name. She had never met him before tonight. She truly could not understand how he had gotten inside. 2 officers separated the parties and took statements. Darius stood near the front door and watched the room the way he always watched rooms, without showing what he was tracking. He watched Lena speak to one of the officers, her voice climbing into helpless distress at precisely chosen intervals. He watched Travis Klein at the dining room table, the alcohol burning off fast now, working through the geometry of what he could and could not say. Travis looked at Lena once from across the room. Lena looked away. Then one of the officers asked Travis how he had accessed the property. "Lena told me to come over tonight," Travis said. "Not the woman who lives here. Not your wife. Her name." The easy automatic use of first name that you only produce when you know someone personally. Not casually and not professionally, but the specific familiarity that builds over months of time spent together. The officer wrote something down. Across the room, Lena's face went through 3 rapid adjustments before she pulled it back under control. Darius had been watching the whole time. He had seen the 2 seconds before the recovery, the calculation in her eyes, the processing of what Travis had just said and what it meant for her account. He said nothing. He gave his statement clearly and precisely, provided the phone recording of Maya's call, answered every question he was asked and nothing beyond it. He did not argue with Lena's version of events. He did not express anything that could be characterized as emotional or uncontrolled, because this conversation was not where the truth was going to matter. The truth was going to matter in a courtroom with documentation. And documentation was something Darius Hale knew exactly how to build. The days that followed were quiet on the outside. Maya stayed with Darius at his parents' house in Henderson, where his mother Vera made sure she ate well and slept in a real bed and was not required to explain anything before she was ready. Vera was not a woman who asked unnecessary questions. She communicated through cooking and presence and the small, consistent acts of a person who understood that some situations called for warmth rather than words. Maya ate. She slept. She watched television with Vera in the evenings and seemed, slowly, to return to something closer to herself. Darius worked from the kitchen table while the house was still. He approached it the way he approached any intelligence problem, methodically, without letting emotion rush him. He started with what he already knew and built outward from there, pulling every piece of available documentation and organizing it carefully as he went. The phone records were first. He was the account holder and had full access. He went back 12 months and ran the numbers he did not recognize against the call history. One number appeared with a frequency that ruled out casual contact immediately. Evenings mostly, sometimes afternoons, occasionally multiple calls in a single day. The calls went back 11 months. They continued straight through to the night of October 9th. He ran the bank statements next, going through the joint account line by line over the preceding 8 months. He found what he was looking for in the places people think their partners will never look, buried in the middle of ordinary transaction lists, hidden by placement rather than concealment. A pattern of dinner charges at restaurants he had never been to, 3 hotel entries on dates when he had been on multi-day field exercises, away from both the base and home. Small individual amounts, spaced to avoid drawing attention. Enough, together, to tell a clear story. Then there were the emails. Lena had created a secondary personal account at some point in the past year. But she had made a setting error, a forwarding rule that pushed her sent messages into a labeled folder inside the family joint account they had shared for years. She had labeled the folder with a string of numbers that looked like a reference code. She had apparently not known that Darius still accessed the joint account regularly. The folder had been sitting there for months, untouched. He opened it and read. The messages were personal in the way that communications between two people in a long relationship always become, full of specific shorthand, references to shared conversations, the ease that develops over months of contact. And on October 9th, at 4:17 in the afternoon, there was this from Lena: "Come over tonight. She is in her room and she will not bother us. He is not coming back anytime soon." And 2 hours later, "Come in through the back gate. The latch is open. Just don't be loud when you come in the door." Darius read both messages twice. He sat at the kitchen table with the refrigerator humming behind him and his mother's television audible from the next room. He looked at the words, "She is in her room and she will not bother us," and thought about what they revealed. Not just about the affair, about the thinking behind it. Lena had known Maya was home. She had treated her daughter's presence as a scheduling inconvenience to manage around. She had planned for Travis to arrive while Maya was contained in her room. And when Travis arrived drunk and aggressive and things went wrong, her child had hidden in a dark basement and called her father in a whisper. Lena's response to that had been to stand in the living room and say she had never seen that man before in her life. Darius closed the laptop. He sat still for a long moment. Then he opened it again and spent the next 2 hours building the most organized document he had ever compiled outside a field report. He cross-referenced every phone record with every calendar date. He matched the hotel charges against his own field exercise schedules. He annotated each message with its timestamp and a plain language note on its significance. He printed the completed file and drove to an office supply store for 3 copies. One for his attorney Patricia Webb, one for Detective Anita Flores at the Clark County Sheriff's Office, and one sealed in an envelope in his own vehicle. He had learned from Raymond Hale, from watching a man solve every problem with the same steady, unremarkable preparation, that you do not win anything with feeling alone. You win with the work. And when the record is complete and the facts speak for themselves, you let the facts carry the weight. He had done the work. Detective Anita Flores received the file on a Tuesday. She was a compact woman in her mid-40s with close-cut natural hair and 16 years with the Clark County Sheriff's Office behind her. She had worked cases from their messiest beginnings through their quiet resolutions and knew which ones had the weight to go the distance. She had taken the initial call on a Hale residence, read the responding officer's notes, read both statements, and had noticed, in the careful way she noticed everything, the places where those 2 accounts should have matched and didn't. When Darius set the folder on her desk, she opened it and read for 20 minutes. When she finished, she placed both hands flat on top of it and looked at him across the desk. "You compiled all of this in 2.5 days." "Yes." "The email messages. You have standing access to that account. Joint account. My name is primary holder. I've accessed it for 4 years. And the phone records. Account holder for 11 years. She tapped the summary at the front. This shows a prior relationship of 11 months. It shows she communicated with him on the day of the incident and specifically invited him to the property. It shows she told him the house would be empty. She looked up, and her official statement to my officers was that she had never met this man before that evening. Darius said nothing. He did not need to. Flores picked up her phone. 2 days later, Lena was arrested at her sister's house before the neighborhood was fully awake. She answered the door and went from half asleep to fully alert in seconds, and then the performance started. She cried, said it was a mistake, said she was the victim, said Travis had frightened her just as much as Maya. She kept it up all the way to the back of the patrol car. The messages did not care about her performance. They said, "Come over tonight." He is not coming back anytime soon. The phone records did not care about her crying. They said 11 months. They said a pattern. They said she knew exactly who Travis Klein was. Lena had not simply been unfaithful. She had knowingly brought a volatile man into the house where her daughter lived, minimized her daughter's presence when making those plans, and when the evening resulted in Maya hiding alone and calling her father in fear, she had constructed a story rather than protect her child. That was what the charges were built on, not the affair, the decisions surrounding it. Travis Klein was picked up the same day. By Thursday evening, both had been processed and formally charged. Darius received Flores' confirmation call at 7:40 that night, sitting at the kitchen table helping Maya with a math worksheet. He stepped into the hallway to take the call, said thank you, and went back to the table. Maya looked up. Who was that? The detective, he said, sitting back down. It's moving forward. She looked at her worksheet for a moment, then said, good, and went back to work. The trial came to Clark County 4 months later in November. The courthouse had the quality all courtrooms share. High ceilings, a wooden bench, the American flag in the corner, rows of seats behind the low railing where the public sat and watched the machinery of consequence work at its deliberate pace. Judge Carl Drummond ran his courtroom without drama and without wasted time, which was the highest compliment Darius could give any room he was required to sit in. He was a large, deliberate man who took his work seriously and had no patience for performances that were designed to substitute for substance. Maya sat beside Darius in the second row, in the blue cardigan her grandmother had given her, hands folded in her lap. She had chosen to be here. Darius had given her the choice directly, no pressure either way, and she had looked at him with those clear, serious eyes and said she wanted to come. She wanted to see it through. He told her she was brave. She shrugged and said she just wanted to know how it ended. Prosecutor David Owens built the case against Travis the way a careful craftsman builds something meant to last. One piece at a time, fit tightly so nothing could wobble under pressure. He laid out the full timeline. The 11 months of prior contact, the messages on October 9th, the instruction to enter through the back gate, the state of the property when officers arrived, what Maya had experienced. He did not embellish. He did not need to. Then he played the recording of Maya's call. The portion where she whispered to her father, where heavy footsteps crossed the floor above her, where the door opened and silence followed, where her final 3 words came through. The courtroom was completely still. Darius had heard this recording many times. He still heard it the same way every time, not just the sounds themselves, but the weight of what surrounded them. His daughter on that cold concrete floor, arms around her shins, not moving, not making a sound, waiting for him to come. When it ended, Owen set down the remote. A 9-year-old girl called her father, he said, because she was afraid in her own home. And she had every reason to be. The defense argued diminished capacity from alcohol, argued good faith belief of permission, argued the endangerment charges overstated a situation with no direct physical contact. The argument was organized and ultimately hollow because it required 12 people who had just heard that recording to set aside what they knew and replace it with a legal abstraction. Fear does not fake itself. Not in the voice of a 9-year-old hiding in a dark closet. Travis Klein's defense did not survive the evidence. Lena's case was heard the following week in the same courtroom. Her attorney had spent the preceding weeks building a narrative around vulnerability and isolation. A military spouse left largely alone for years, who had exercised terrible judgment during a genuinely difficult period and had not anticipated the consequences. He was measured and precise, and he worked with the material skillfully. It was not a weak argument. It was a genuine legal strategy built on foundations that were emotionally real. Military spouses did experience isolation. Long marriages under deployment strain did erode. The argument was designed to generate enough sympathy to produce reasonable doubt on the conspiracy charge. Lena took the stand and delivered her account in a steady, quietly broken voice. She talked about loneliness. She talked about years of short visits and missed events and raising a child essentially alone. She described October 9th as something that had slipped out of her control. Travis had arrived more intoxicated than she expected. She had panicked. She had been too ashamed to tell police the full truth right away. She was composed. She was specific. She looked like a woman telling the honest truth about a failure she carried real regret for. It might have worked. On the third day of the trial, Patricia Webb stood up and requested permission to introduce an additional piece of evidence. She walked Judge Drummond through the documentation. Security system installation record from 4 months prior, server authentication logs, complete chain of custody. The opposing attorney objected. Drummond took an hour-long recess to review the materials. When court resumed, he admitted the evidence. 4 months before the incident, during a long weekend at home, Darius had updated the home security system, added exterior cameras, and installed a secondary audio backup feature to the existing alarm. The feature captured ambient audio from the main living areas during a triggered alarm event and stored it on a remote server for 72 hours. He had installed it because he was away more than he was present, and good systems mattered when you were gone. He had not mentioned the audio feature to Lena because at the time, he saw no reason to. On October 9th, the alarm had been triggered briefly during the initial disturbance, and the system had captured everything from the living area from 5 in the afternoon through midnight. Most of it was ordinary household sound. Then, at 6:47 in the evening, it captured something else. The audio was played in the courtroom. 31 seconds. Lena's voice, calm, familiar, completely at ease. The voice of a person comfortable in her own kitchen, making ordinary plans. You can come over tonight. She's in her room, and she won't bother us. He is not coming back anytime soon. A brief pause. The faint sound of Lena moving across the kitchen. Just come through the back. Don't be loud when you get to the door. I don't want to... The clip ended. The courtroom had been quiet during the recording. When it ended, the quality of the quiet changed. It became heavier and more final. The particular silence of a room where something ambiguous has become unambiguous, where the space for any other interpretation has closed permanently. Lena was looking at the floor. Her attorney was very still. The recording had not just contradicted her account. It had replaced it. In 31 seconds, it had shown the courtroom the actual version of October 9th. Lena in her kitchen, calm and cheerful and planning, her daughter in the next room, and her husband on his way, and neither one a real consideration. Her attorney requested a continuance. Judge Drummond denied it. The jury was out for less than 6 hours. Judge Carl Drummond did not rush his sentencing. He read from prepared notes and looked at both defendants directly when he addressed them. He was not theatrical about it. His words carried weight because they were honest, and the courtroom understood the difference. Travis Klein was sentenced first. He stood at the defense table with his hands clasped in front of him. Mr. Klein, Drummond said, a child was in this home. She experienced genuine terror. She was forced to hide alone and call for help because the environment you contributed to made her afraid in a place where she had every right to feel safe. The fact that your judgment was impaired does not reduce that reality. It defines the recklessness with which you created it. 4 years in state prison on the combined charges of criminal trespass, attempted assault, and child endangerment. Possibility of early release after 28 months pending behavior review. Travis said nothing. He looked toward the gallery briefly before being led away. Darius met his eyes without expression, not with anger or satisfaction, just the direct, steady gaze of a man who had done what needed to be done and required nothing from the outcome. Lena's sentencing came the following morning. Her attorney had advised her to address the court, believing a statement of genuine remorse might influence Drummond's decision. She had prepared for it. She stood and spoke about Maya. She spoke about making terrible choices during a painful time. She said she would carry the weight of what happened for the rest of her life. Her voice broke at the right moments. She was looking toward the gallery when she said the last part. She was not looking at Darius. He had sent Maya to the hallway with Patricia Webb before the statement began. He had heard enough of Lena's performances to know what this one was designed to produce, and he had decided his daughter did not need to sit through it. He sat through it himself, alone in the second row, with the patience of a man who had read the situation correctly months ago and was simply watching it arrive at its natural destination. Drummond listened to the full statement. When Lena finished, he set his papers down and looked at her directly. Mrs. Hale, this court understands that military marriages carry real and documented hardships. Those hardships are not a justification. You did not simply pursue a private relationship. You planned an evening in which a volatile individual would enter a home occupied by your minor child. You minimized your daughter's presence when you communicated those plans. And when the evening resulted in your daughter hiding alone and calling her father in fear, you chose to obscure the truth from law enforcement. He paused. This court has heard your statement today and notes the language of remorse. It also heard 31 seconds of audio from October 9th, in which you were calm, you were planning, and you were cheerful. 3 years. Child endangerment, conspiracy, providing false information to law enforcement. Parole eligibility after 18 months, pending completion of court-mandated counseling. Lena received the sentence without crying this time. She held her composure through the reading, held it until the bailiff stepped forward, and then something beneath it gave way briefly, and she looked toward the gallery one last time. Darius met her eyes. He held them for 2 seconds. Then he looked away. The side door opened and closed behind her. Just a sound, ordinary, mechanical, unremarkable. The sound of a room when something is finally finished. Darius picked up his jacket and stood. In the hallway outside, Patricia Webb was with Maya, who stood with her arms crossed, watching the courtroom door. When Darius came out, she looked at his face. "It's done," he said. She nodded once. Then she leaned against his arm, and he put his hand on her shoulder, and they walked out of the building into the November morning together. Spring arrived in the Mojave without ceremony. 1 week the mornings were cold enough for jackets. The next, the air shifted and the desert returned to itself, dry and bright and enormous. The sky a shade of blue with no gray in it. It was April when Darius drove Maya down to Lake Mead. He had been coming here since he was a boy. Raymond had brought him on occasional Sundays, sitting on the flat rocks near the southern shoreline, fishing without much success. Darius had understood, even as a young boy, that the fish were not the point. The point was the stillness, the scale of the water against the desert. The way the lake sat there in the middle of all that emptiness like something that had decided it belonged there and was not going anywhere. Raymond had never explained any of that. Darius had felt it, the same way he felt most of the things his father passed on to him, not through words but through presence. They parked in the gravel lot and walked down to the shoreline without speaking. The lake was lower than it once was. The pale tide marks on the surrounding rock faces showed how far the water had receded over the years, layer by layer. The surface was flat and deep blue, moving in small, barely visible swells that caught the afternoon light and gave it back clean. They found a wide, flat section of rock and sat. Maya was in jeans and her grandmother's blue cardigan, hair braided, looking out at the water with the quiet she had developed over the past several months. Not a sad quiet, a thoughtful one. The quiet of someone who had processed something real and come out the other side carrying a different weight than the one they went in with. Darius sat beside her with his elbows on his knees and looked at the lake and let himself be still. After a while, Maya spoke. "Is she coming back?" she asked. Her voice was even and clear. She was looking at the water, not at him. "No," he said, not with anger behind it, not with bitterness or grief or satisfaction. Just the word, delivered as simply as a fact about the water level or the temperature of the air. Maya absorbed it. A small nod. "You didn't believe her," she said after a moment. "That night in the living room, when she was saying she didn't know him. You didn't believe her." "No," he said. "How did you know?" He thought about how to answer that honestly, in a way that was useful rather than just satisfying to say. He thought about the account delivered too fast and too organized, the missing physical signs of genuine shock, the particular quality of Lena's eyes. He thought about the 2 years before October 9th when the marriage had felt hollow in a way that was different from ordinary distance. The way certain kinds of dishonesty develop a texture you learn to feel over time. The way an experienced soldier learns to read ground that looks safe but isn't. "I've spent a long time reading situations," he said. "Reading what's real and what isn't. After enough years, it stops being something you think about and starts being something you just know." He paused, and I believed what she did more than what she said. Maya turned the phrase over quietly. "I believed what she did. It's the cleaner measure," he said. "What people say can be anything. What people do is what's actually true." She worked through that for a moment in the careful way she worked through most things. Then she leaned against his shoulder, the way she had been leaning against him since she was small enough to carry in one arm. He shifted to accommodate her and put his arm around her, and they sat like that without speaking while the light moved across the water and the desert held its enormous quiet all around them. "I'm not sad about her," Maya said, almost to herself, after a while. "You might be sometimes," he said. "Later on. That's okay if you are. Are you?" He thought about it honestly. He thought about Lena the way she had been when they were first married. The laugh, the directness, the energy of someone who had not yet decided to be smaller than they actually were. He thought about the years between that woman and October 9th, the distance he had contributed to and the distance he had not. "I'm not sad about what happened," he said. "I'm sad about what she chose. There's a difference." Maya nodded slowly. as if she was filing it somewhere she would use later. A bird crossed very high above the lake, riding a thermal over the center of the water. The afternoon light had shifted to a deeper gold, warm and horizontal, stretching everything out. The surface reflected it in pieces, the way broken things sometimes catch light more completely than whole things do. After a while, Maya said, "Dad, yeah, I'm hungry." He almost smiled. "We can fix that," he said. He got to his feet and offered her his hand, and she took it without looking at it. The easy, thoughtless way children take the hand of someone they completely trust. They walked back up the rocky slope toward the gravel lot together, the lake behind them, the afternoon light warm on their backs. Darius Hale had been carrying weight since he was a young man, watching his father put on work boots before sunrise. Some of it he would carry for the rest of his life. The absence of a marriage, the years that could not be returned, the nights when his daughter had been in a house with a man who had no business being there and her father had been 3 hours away on a dark highway. He carried all of it, but what he felt right now, walking with his daughter's hand in his, was something he had not felt in a long time. Something he recognized only because he had felt it once before, early in the marriage, before everything had grown complicated and quiet and wrong. Something close to peace. Not the peace that comes from forgetting. The peace that comes from finishing something that needed to be finished. From standing at the worst point and doing the right thing and coming out the other side with the person who mattered most still beside you. Darius Hale had not been a perfect husband. He had been absent when he should have been present. He had missed signs he should have read sooner. He did not pretend otherwise. Not to himself, not to anyone. He would account for his own failures the way he had always accounted for them. Directly, without excuses, without asking for sympathy he had not earned. But he had been there when it mattered most. He had answered the phone. He had moved without hesitation. He had gone down those stairs and found his daughter on that cold concrete floor and said the only 4 words she needed to hear. He had gathered the truth carefully and handed it over without a single unnecessary word. He had let the process work the way it was supposed to work, and he had made sure it had everything it needed to work completely. And when Lena had stood in that courtroom and tried one last time to make the story something it was not, 31 seconds of audio had played, and the story had become exactly what it actually was. Permanently and without appeal. No forgiveness. Not because he was a coal man. He was not. But he understood the difference between forgiving a mistake and extending trust to someone who had placed their child in danger and then lied about it. Some choices closed doors permanently. Darius had no interest in standing in front of permanently closed doors and wishing they were still open. He had a daughter to raise. He had a life to build on what remained when you stripped away everything that had been false. That was enough. It had always been enough. He just needed to make sure she knew it.